All right, welcome everyone. This is Ask the Experts Cloud in 2020 Predictions versus Reality. My name is Madhukar and I'm Vice President of Product Marketing at Nutanix. And like I said, we've been talking a lot about cloud in 2020. And at the beginning of the year, we had a lot of predictions and a lot of trends that experts were writing about how things would change when it comes to cloud. So today we really want to get together. As it turns out, 2020 is not exactly what we had all expected. So today I have a group of experts along with me, and I wanted them to introduce themselves. And we want to go talk a little bit about what were the predictions as we got into 2020 and where are we right now. So in terms of the panel, let's look at who we have over here. I have with me Avinash, Kalyan, Arush, and Anendo. So let's go through by whatever it's showing on slide. Avinash, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself first?
Thank you, Madhukar. My name is Avinash Shetty. I'm Senior Director of Product Management at Nutanix. I've been with Nutanix now roughly 7 years, done various roles, but currently leading the product management for a product called Clusters.
Very good. Kalyan?
Sure, I can go next. This is Kalyan Kaki. I'm a Principal Program Manager lead at Microsoft. I've been with the company for just about 16 years now. My team is responsible for building Nutanix clusters in cloud in Azure, among many other things.
Thank you, Kalyan. Arush?
Thanks, Madhukar. I'm Arush Sohi. I'm Senior Director of Engineering at Nutanix. Been here for 8 years now. For the past few years, I've been dealing with all things Kubernetes at Nutanix.
Good. Hello, everyone. My name is Ananda Sengupta. I'm a Director of Product Management here at Nutanix. Been with Nutanix for the last 3 years, currently working on some of our management and operation solutions.
Very good. Thanks, Ananda. All right, so let's switch our screen. So what I wanted to do next is just talk a little bit about, like I said earlier, what we saw in terms of the experts and the analysts talking about 2020 when it came to cloud, and of course the reality. As it turns out, the reality is a lot more harsher and different than what we had expected for 2020. It's very, very different. But I'm a junkie when it comes to prediction. I've always loved predictions. So the first thing I do somewhere around December, January is to go hunt through the Gartner's Forresters of the world and see what are the big predictions. So when it came to cloud, there were some big, bold predictions out there that this is the year we'll see most of the workloads go to the cloud. And this is the year when cloud will be more secure than on-premise, and we'll see more and more companies go to the cloud. This is the year when truly cost optimization will take over, and when companies and organizations move to the cloud, it's because going from CapEx to OpEx, it's going to get better cloud, better pricing, better cost optimization. So I know, Anando, you as part of a Beam team, you look at how companies are using cloud. Just tell us a little bit about what Beam is and what kind of data we have been looking at, and what are some of the trends that you're seeing when it comes to cloud optimization in the last 6 months, especially since we been in a lockdown.
Sure. So at Nutanix, we actually have a product called Beam, which is our multi-cloud cost governance solution. And what we've been doing for over 5 years is actually helping customers manage their cloud spend. And with that, we also get a wealth of data that we can see across verticals, across industry segments. And we come up with our annual report, which we call the Cloud Usage Report. And you'll see that report link in the session details as well. But every year we look at holistically how the cloud consumption patterns are moving. And this year was obviously very interesting with COVID and the whole pandemic affecting us right from the February timeframe when China numbers started coming in. And what we saw was pretty interesting, where overall there's been obviously a secular public cloud consumption story growing year on year. And interestingly, 2020 hit it off the same way in January. But when we looked at the data through the months, and if I take February through April, May, that's what we've analyzed, it was interesting to see two things that kind of came out very strongly about public cloud consumption. One, we saw that different verticals actually reacted differently based on their overall economic trends. But one thing was consistent was customers were able to actually truly use public cloud the way it's intended to be. So we saw someone dial in costs very aggressively and others actually dial out costs. So one example being when you looked at the retail and the manufacturing segment, and we all know what retail has been going through, it was interesting to see from a baseline of January cloud spend, they went down almost 40 to 50% within 45 days. I mean, that was really shocking, but that's really the I would say the flexibility of cloud consumption. On the other hand, we saw our technology, media, and telecom customers, and we've been hearing a lot about how the whole world's going digital, and we really saw that with spend in that vertical going on from February through April, increased 30% on, by the way, increasing base in 2019. So pretty interesting ways how COVID's impacted some of these verticals that we saw.
Yeah, that's pretty fascinating. And I would assume that, in some industries, we would see completely different because as we are seeing, for example, education, healthcare, maybe we see an increase while as in other industries it's going down. Well, do you see what kind of adoption do you see when it comes to cloud usage? I know, especially when we look at the numbers, one thing that jumps out to me is that we see a lot more customers who are eager to either adopt more Azure or go towards Azure. What kind of data do you see over there when you look at the consumptions?
Yeah, so I'll qualify. While we don't do a overall public cloud study, I mean there are enough analysts out there who do that, but we have our data set based on actual Beam users. So the good thing about our report is we actually see real trends of a large customer base and billions of dollars of spend that we manage. So one of the things that we've been seeing is consistently, and that continued last year, was a very strong adoption growth relatively in terms of growth rates, where we see Azure growing way faster than AWS. And obviously we're not talking about the base, but the trends are strong. But interestingly, what we also observed was in the commercial segment, we traditionally, I mean, enterprises actually have been the early adopters. We don't see much variance, but we see a significant growth in the commercial segment, which is really the around less than $1 billion kind of revenue, where we see a accelerated growth in Azure adoption. So it was pretty interesting that kind of came out in the numbers, but overall Azure continues to grow faster than AWS in the data set we analyze. And yeah, that means for enterprise customer base, we see the same thing in the market as well in terms of usage. Yeah.
Right, and like you said, Anindo, to qualify, this is the data that we have based on our customers using the cost governance product. But I see something similar when I talk to customers and CIOs as well. Kalyan, you're on the other side since being part of the Azure team. Your team as well as Nutanix team, we have been working towards a joint solution that helps customers that are looking to do kind of both hybrid, as well as if they're looking to go from on-prem to cloud, then they're looking at solutions that kind of work everywhere. What's your thought? Could you talk a little bit about what we have been doing together, and two, what you've been generally seeing from the Azure point?
Thank you. Yep, this is a new trend, having to unmute anytime you want to talk. Right. Okay. So yeah, totally in line with what you guys have been seeing in terms of what sectors are growing. Right. So let me take a minute to talk about the partnership that we have. Right. I think the way I would describe what we are building together is an elegant hybrid cloud from an engineering perspective that has a very simple business model for the customers, and most importantly, puts the customer first. When I say customer first, it means for our joint customers who have both Nutanix and Azure estates and there are things they love for whatever reason it is, we are giving them the choice to bring what they have been used to on premises with your Nutanix estate right into Azure. And at the same time, we are also extending their ability to take the best of Azure to on-premises with the Arc solutions that we are jointly building together. So to me, I think it is It is for any of the customers that are looking at doing lift and shift or expansion or burst or also modernize their existing on-premises deployment. What we are building together is just right there. And also the fact that we are making it super easy for them to bring their existing licenses over onto Azure, at the same time use the Azure MACC commitments that they already have. Should make it absolutely easy and also frictionless to get started. I mean, you don't have to wait for your CFO to approve your spend. You probably already have it approved if you have your licenses and if you have your MAC commitments.
That's awesome. And, I'm looking at the chat as people are coming in and posting their questions as well. Somebody anonymously just posted that when they went from CapEx to OpEx, it was a total of 50% reduction or something like that in a month. And then there's another question that just came in is like the data point that Azure is going faster than AWS is completely statistical or not. And Sahil, who's one of our colleagues, he's out there in the chat world and he's responding to it as well. So I do want to call out that this is completely statistical. It's not anecdotal. This is based on the data of what we see when people use our product. Having said that, it's a small sample size or relatively smaller sample size. So treat it that way. But one of the things that we've heard about quite a lot when it comes to cloud predictions is what kind of workloads, what kind of use cases are people really looking to move from on-premise to the cloud, or even use cases that cuts across both of them. So Avinash, I know you've worked with a lot of our customers who have been working with our product clusters. What kind of use cases do you see? Of course, I'm assuming given the COVID-19 and the macro conditions, that has affected how people are using cloud and specifically hybrid. But tell us a little bit about what you see when you talk to the customers.
So thanks, Madhukar. Yeah, definitely a wide variety of workloads is where we're seeing early traction. In terms of what customers tell me, what their business needs are, I would say everything from, like you said, COVID has changed the way people think. So VDI as a workload has really taken off in the world of COVID. And they just don't have the resources to actually spin this up really quickly within the four walls of the data center. So one of the use cases that we're seeing really early traction on is this idea around burst, right? I want to basically spin something up really quickly. I want to tear it down really quickly. I want basically, whether I'm doing an acquisition behind the scenes, whatever that situation may be, but I want to basically be able to burst things up and burst things down as my business needs change. So from an on-demand elasticity perspective, we're seeing a lot of early traction in this space. The other one, we're seeing some service providers, for instance, come and tell us around things like just-in-time provisioning. I think the comment earlier around the idea that it takes a while for a customer to rack stack, cable, bring everything online. On the cloud, they don't have to do any of that. They can almost instantly provision workloads and bring that online is really resonating as well. And last but not least, workloads that, for instance, they don't need to size for peak. DR is a good example of this. For a once in a year, maybe every other year event, customers are taking on huge costs in keeping that data center and those lights on 24/7, 365. So the cloud being a perfect use case for something like that.
That's good to know. So Avinash, there are some comments that are coming up. Somebody is saying that, look, when it comes to cloud adoption, it also brings you new issues like TUC, ULA review, third-party apps and services, data governance issues, and the need to catalog all SaaS solutions, where your data sits and so on. So what do you think is unique about what we are doing with clusters? Like, tell us a little bit about, again, from what customers are telling you and how they are using clusters. And remember to go off mute.
Yeah, so I think, that's a definite valid concern. So we've seen that time and time again where, this concern around, are my on-prem licenses valid on the public cloud? Can I bring any workload to the public cloud and it would seamlessly work? Those are genuine, legitimate concerns. What we're seeing is that these application vendors are working both with the cloud service providers like Microsoft Azure, as well as with solutions like Nutanix, because we're bringing a new paradigm into the equation. Technically we are running the same architecture as the customer would be running on-prem. We just happen to be running it in the public cloud environment. So that raises some very interesting conversations with both these application vendors as well as the cloud providers in terms of what is a valid configuration, what is a valid license, is that license really portable between on-prem and off-prem, et cetera, et cetera. So we're seeing a lot of these debates really like playing out. For the most part, we actually haven't seen app vendors come back and say, you can't do this, or these licenses aren't necessarily portable. So for the most part, depending on the vendor we are dealing with, these applications can seamlessly transport back and forth with that licensing for that application seamlessly migrating as well. Madhukar, you're on mute this time.
Yeah. So the next question, Arush, is for you. Given that your expertise is kind of on the developer side, you're part of the engineering team, but more specifically around Kubernetes. And just to give you a little bit of background, I personally come from cloud native world as well. Worked in startups where we used to do all completely cloud natives and completely Kubernetes based. So we've been watching, and I've been personally watching the overall evolution of Kubernetes in the last few years. And there again, some massive predictions. Is that a lot of, as you know, a lot of industry analysts will say today that Kubernetes is the operating system of all the public clouds out there. And if you double click on it, one of the things that the IT folks like about this is that now you can create portable code. You can write something that you can run agnostic to whatever platform that you're running on. But when it comes to development, when it comes to automation of the deployments to the different substrate, what are you seeing when it comes to Kubernetes? And what are some of the things that are actually happening versus the prediction that might have happened a few months ago?
Sure, Madhukar, so you actually hit the nail on the head that portability is a big thing, right? I mean, that kind of plays into the aspect of that, write once, deploy anywhere kind of aspect. I also wanted to touch upon the point which Avinash was mentioning, that having this declarative style of defining your application, your rules, your conformance rules, your governance rules actually really helps for portability of your IT ops and SecOps as well with Kubernetes. So when applications which are written on Kubernetes are portable, so are their governance rules. So that's very interesting. More than that, I think the abstraction of the operating system, of course, happened with container technologies, and Kubernetes kind of evolved out of Borg, where we ended up with the elasticity and scalability of compute. And eventually we went into better definition of storage and network interfaces, which we are seeing happening at a very, very rapid pace. Today, you see a new networking technology or a new storage vendor every day in the cloud native space. So you kind of cover all the bases on compute, storage, and networking, and you kind of have a valid operating system, quote unquote, an operating system. And on the cloud side, what are the things which you see? You want repeatability in your automation, you want repeatability in your CI/CD operations, and you want repeatability in your ops. And we see the paradigm of GitOps, for example, right? And we see that even for example, we see that even in Azure Arc for Kubernetes there, right? We have a simple plugin to actually do GitOps. And it uses the same technology for doing SecOps, which ensures that your cluster is also conformant. So you no longer have to worry about local regulations. You are taking care of that. So you set up your policy once, you set up your GitOps policy once, you deploy anywhere. So that's huge for anybody to kind of create these. People try to work across silos, but the governance is across all the silos, right? So that's great. And what we see now is the biggest thing which I see in the form of it being a cloud OS is actually the democratization of enterprise ready applications, right? You no longer require a large server. sitting in a room to actually build an application which can run anywhere, right? And that is massive, right? In my opinion, right? So anybody can, have a Minikube installed on their laptop, create something. A lot of our developers do that. And all of a sudden, they go and apply it on, AKS or an on-prem Kubernetes cluster, and it just works, right? So that is massive in my opinion, right? So I definitely see that Kubernetes is going to become more and more pervasive as the application deployment environment for any modern application.
That's a really good point. I remember, about 4 or 5 years ago, if I had to go create a brand new application, I would have to go and find the right Ubuntu distro or whatever I'm running on. I would go create virtual machine, and I would install my web server, my app server, create all of that. Then I hand it over to somebody in QA. And if they don't have the exact same configuration, it doesn't work. So you're spending so much of time to, troubleshoot it. So I do see with Kubernetes, I think the key word that you used earlier is repeatability. It gives you the ease of use to be able to repeat it without really worrying about how the underlying layers are working on one environment to the other. But one of the predictions, so to speak, I've heard quite a lot is, hey, in the future, we have moved from virtual machines to containers, and in the future, it's going to be all Kubernetes. But the reality is, when you talk to the customers, that your existing application, which is a good chunk of it, it's not going to change into containers. And even if it does, it's not going to be overnight. So what we see is that if it's a brand new application, people are exploring more Kubernetes versus doing it all on virtual machines. What are your thoughts? What do you see, when it comes to adoption? And two-part question, Arush. The second question I would have for you is, typically when you think about Kubernetes, it comes about, well, it can run across multiple clouds. But now I've started to hear some who are exploring using Kubernetes across on-prem as well as a public cloud.
Right.
Thoughts over there?
So the first part is absolutely true. Right, we said that databases would never run in VMs. They run in VMs now, but it took us time. It took us nearly 15 years to actually get to a point where we'd say that, hey, a database can run in a VM and we can guarantee performance, right? We do see some amount of shift towards container. For example, we are working with Azure Data Services to see some databases deployed in containers. I think it's going to be a long tail of transition. And that's going to be one very interesting challenge for all of us to solve there, that how do we actually manage application infrastructure across VMs and containers? Because we are going to live in this, that's the other hybrid world, which I call, right, the VM and container hybrid world, if I may call it that. So that's going to be an interesting thing, lots of interesting challenges to solve there. The second thing, with regards to your second question, you answered that we spoke about it in the form of, you can run it anywhere, right? Kubernetes gives you that common abstraction plane, right? The reason why I'm going to choose a cloud or running on-prem is going to be cost or ease of use or ease of access, conformance, government regulations, and so on and so forth, right? I don't want my developers to be rewriting and replatforming every application. I'm never going to be able to achieve that velocity. I think that is the biggest thing which is playing into Kubernetes being, people are talking about how we can stretch it across clouds, right? Or across on-prem and clouds. And while I say that it's going to be possible, I also think about a challenge there, and that's going to be the next set of challenges for us to solve, which is going to be the networking challenge, right? So how are we? That's kind of rapidly evolving. I feel that space, and a lot of folks are trying to solve those things. In some ways, we have solved the problem of conformance, etc., across two hybrid workflows like VMs and containers. Again, with Azure, you get a common management plane across both of them. With Azure, you get a common management plane for a hybrid on-prem and AKS clusters. You get the same management plane. So I think there's a lot more to be done in actually running an application across the on-prem and the cloud. And that's going to be interesting. But I see that as a distinct possibility within the next year or so. So
makes sense. I would bet $50 with you on that. So let's move on to looking at the clock here. We have about 3 more minutes left. So Kalyan, somebody's asking us on the chat that you earlier mentioned something about MACC. I've been calling it MAC. And the question is, you mentioned using MACC in the beginning towards your hybrid solution. Is that only for Azure or both Azure and Nutanix? And maybe when you answer, Kalyan, if you could talk a little bit about what does it mean for Microsoft customers to be able to run their application on Nutanix and Azure with clusters? Maybe talk a little bit about specific to our joint customer.
I did click the button, but yeah. So the MAC commitments for your Nutanix assets on Azure, that is when you're deploying Nutanix clusters on Azure, you could go buy the licenses when we launch this product into preview. You could use your MAC commitments to buy Nutanix licenses through the marketplace, and the bare metal that is running your clusters is treated as a first-party Microsoft bare metal, which means all of the whole package is eligible for MAC, eligible for purchase through MAC commitment. I hope that answers. And to your point on what else, because you are a Microsoft customer who is running Nutanix clusters in Azure, for the instances that are running in Azure, you also are eligible to get extended service updates. You're also eligible for Azure hybrid benefits. So there are all these benefits that you get to use when you sign up for Nutanix clusters on Azure. In addition to that, I think Arush did touch upon this, and we touched upon this a little bit. As a joint customer of Microsoft and Nutanix, we are working on enabling all of Arc services to run on the Nutanix on-premises, which means you love Arc, you have the ability to take it to Nutanix on-premises, just like you love your Nutanix portal. You can use it to go manage your Nutanix clusters that are running in Azure as well.
Very cool. So just to recap then what you talked about, Kalyan, and earlier Avinash as well, for our joint customers, they could go to Nutanix Prism Central, which is the user interface, and from there choose Azure as an endpoint, deploy a cluster, and be able to move the virtual machines, containers, databases, workloads around without having to relearn, without having to re-architect and refactor the application. And the second most important piece of this is that if you are an Azure customer and you're using Arc, then you can use Arc UI to manage your Kubernetes cluster, as well as manage your CI/CD pipeline with GitOps as well.
Yep.
So what I would do next is for customers who are interested in finding out more about this joint solution. And of course, we'll continue to answer more questions as they come in. But let me put up the slide. So make sure that if you're interested, you can either go to nutanix.com/Microsoft, and you can sign up to join for the waitlist for the preview availability of clusters, which is what we just talked about. But make sure to see it in action. I'm sure this is something that will be a lot of interest to folks, especially practitioners. Check out DB402, which is the digital breakout session, which has a live demo, and Kalyan, I believe you're in that as well. And if you're looking to see how you can use Nutanix today, and you want to go get your own cluster and try it out, just go to nutanix.com/test drive with a hyphen, and you should be able to go get your own cluster and try it out for a few hours as well. With that, I would like to thank my panel. Thanks very much. It was a great, engaging talk, and as we all know, we can continue on talking forever and ever on different aspects of it. But thanks again. Really appreciate everybody's input on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.